Hey, boys and girls, and welcome back to In the Eyes of Truth for our third English language episode. With us today, guest is Kevin Michelizzi. I'm probably butchering his last name again, as I have a bad tendency of doing, so I apologize. Kevin has a very, very interesting background. He's presently residing in Crimea and getting a fireworks show every night overhead, as I understand it. Um,
Dear friends, are you worried about what's going on the American market? Are you paying attention to the death spiral that the American debt has taken on? Every 4 months, $1 trillion gets added to the debt. And as we know, that 4 months is now turning to 3 months. And it will turn to 2 months, and it will turn to every month. It's called hyperinflation. If you're paying attention, you should be worried about that your hard earned money, the treasures that you've stored up, the inheritance that you may be getting from your parents or have gotten from previous generations is all going to be destroyed. Now, gold is always the bulwark against such inflation. But if you think about holding that gold in the United States, you're going down the wrong path. Let us remember 1932, 1933, when a G-man stood in every bank ready to take that gold away and give worthless money, worthless paper money. It happened once, it will happen again. That's why you should come visit the site of my friends at Exit Strategy World. They're going to help you find that safe harbor, that place that you can put away that gold in a jurisdiction that greedy politicians and spendthrifts can't reach. They're going to help you find that strategy, and they'll help you get that ever vital second passport. Because without a second lifeline, you're a prisoner in whatever nation you happen to be in, and you are a prisoner at the whim of any politician that comes to power. You should always have that exit strategy. The exit strategy globally, the world. So come visit our friends at exitstrategy.world.
Gold, the currency of kings. A safe harbor in times of war and fiat currency mass destruction. At exitstrategy.world, our team can help you vault gold in the safest offshore jurisdictions for citizens of the Eurasian Economic Union nations, including in Dubai and Hong Kong. Exitstrategy.world. Create your own free world.
So, Kevin, tell us about what you were doing in the U.S., what brought you to Crimea, to Russia, and how are you finding Russia right now, and about the fireworks show. I think the audience would enjoy that too.
Sure. Well, like you say, my name's Kevin Michelizzi. You actually got it right. So, yeah. And I started out my long career back, grew up in Minnesota, went to work in Silicon Valley for several years doing low-level software development, ended up at Microsoft for several years, and I was recruited out of Microsoft by the Air Force Blue Team out of Austin, Texas. And they're the guys who monitor hacking of military computers. And did some work for them for a while, and then went off to work for a Department of Defense contractor, and they were in the business of building propaganda systems for the Department of Defense. And it was kind of interesting to see how these projects were funded. They would start out as a $500 million project, and we'd get within a few weeks of running out of money, and all of a sudden there'd be CIA and NSA and FBI guys all on the calls with the generals from Cyber Command. And all of a sudden this, black sleeve funding would come in, and there would be, millions and millions of dollars coming in.
Now, when you say propaganda systems, what are you actually describing? I mean, you're obviously not just describing some placard or some commercial. What exactly is a propaganda system?
Yeah, the old way that the CIA used to do propaganda is they would go out and they would type up news stories and distribute them to friendly journalists who would print them in newspapers.
New York Times.
Now, yeah. So the new systems that they have out there are actually computerized. They're run on small mini computers, and they will actually take an entire set of computers, routers, and they will take them to various military bases. They're installed all over the US. I went out and helped install one in Guam, Romania, and they have a government-run internet on them. So they have their own backbone where the information does not actually go across the regular internet. And they can use this for training military people, FBI, CIA agents on how to distribute propaganda electronically. And then they have a link where they can say, go out to the real internet and give me 150,000 user accounts out of, Canada or Russia that are pro-Ukrainian. And it will actually go through real people's profiles, pull their profiles out of the social media networks. They will generate new names on them, but all the data and everything behind them is the same, and the sentiment. And then they will use those accounts to put out articles electronically to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat. And at the time when I moved to Russia, they were actually pushing stuff out to VK as well, because they had an open API system. And then they can go in and they can have the computer log in as hundreds of thousands of other people to go and like those posts or dislike them to drive the perception of the communities that they're targeting. So one of the projects I worked on was when Russia released the Sputnik vaccine. And what they did is they saw that there was a lot of positive energy on it on social media, and they wanted to make it look like it was bad. So they actually distributed through this computer system. These computer systems also go into the BBC, CNN, all these big news services. So they pushed out these articles saying that the Sputnik vaccine was never tested, it was no good. And then they would have these accounts that they generated go in and like those articles, add small comments to them. So it then drives public perception to say Sputnik is no good. And they measure the community responses to the various things. So that's what I was working on. I worked on the computer systems. I wrote the manuals for them, and I was still working for them in 2020 when I moved to Crimea. My wife had brought me here in 2006, right after I had met her. And we had decided at that time we were going to retire here, just fell in love with the peninsula. We saw it degrading on a regular basis. When Russia came in 2014, we came over, we bought our first apartment here, and we spent about 6 months out of the year here until 2020. My wife came over in January, her mother was ill. I came over March 8th, or March 6th, the day that they closed the Russian border for COVID. And I arrived. Yeah, I arrived at 6:30 in the morning. They closed the borders at 8 o'clock. I was still in the airport waiting to get to Crimea. So I got lucky on that one. I got here. I was still working for the Department of Defense, and we had just started planning attacks against Russia in Ukraine. So I was involved in these propaganda campaigns with NATO allies, Romania, Hungary, Poland, where they actually had installed systems. And I was training people to be able to, draw attention towards the conflict and drive the perception that Russia was bad, Russia's evil, and, the West is good. The things that we're seeing today. Well, it generated some interest here because I was here and I had applied for residency because I had to stay anyway. And so I got questioned about my background and consulted with a government agency
It shall not be named.
that shall not be named to help them understand this system. And let's just say that they had their eyes on it. They saw the code that makes it run, the computer systems that it ran. And, a lot of people may call me a traitor for doing that. And on the other hand, I viewed it as I planned on taking citizenship and staying anyway. And it was my way to contribute to my new motherland and, be able to support the country that I plan to live in.
Let me ask you this. I mean, you're working on this, and you obviously see that, it's generating lies. Propaganda. There's two types of propaganda. First off, propaganda. There's white propaganda. There's black propaganda. White propaganda
Right.
being, don't litter, brush your teeth, don't beat your kids, don't do
Right.
drugs. White propaganda. That's black propaganda. Oh, beat your kids, drink drugs, and and these countries are evil because we can't make money there like we want to make money. Um,
Yeah.
did that realization? I understand. I know you knew what you were doing. Did that start any kind of feelings of the type of power, the government that you're supporting in the U.S. that's running these kinds of campaigns, that's running this kinds of disruption?
Yeah. I looked at this and this was on my mind even before I moved here, which was, at that time, the whole deal around uh, Iraq was coming out and the lies behind that. And it's like seeing the lies that were being told to people on a regular basis and people hearing so much of it that they believed it. And it's like, this is wrong. And for me, it just wasn't the right thing. Now I hear people even to this day saying, well, all Russian news is propaganda. And, you know, everybody does it. So I'm not going to say that Russia doesn't do it, but they're on the basis of the 1980s compared to where the United States was in driving perceptions. And they tend to be a little too honest sometimes. So I just, you know, didn't appreciate the way people were being lied to. So I started not only talking to this agency, but I started writing about the topic and doing video streams about it as well to let people know how to identify when they were being told mostly the truth and when they were being told outright lies.
Yeah. Well, slanted journalism, as we recall, isn't anything new. It
Right.
just wasn't computerized before. Hirsch created the whole term of yellow journalism. What did he
Yeah.
say? Yeah, you give me the country, I'll give you the war. So he made his fortune off of that.
hmm
Uh, so I guess, yeah, it's just gotten onto the cyber age. It's very interesting. What you're describing, that system is basically a self-licking ice cream cone.
Yes.
It creates its own accounts, its own users, its own articles, and then it criticizes or supports its own articles. It's a self-contained system.
Yeah.
Uh, Incredible, actually. I mean, if you think about it, it's just incredible how much manipulation.
Yeah. And they can, since they can monitor this on a regular basis of how real people on the real internet are perceiving things, they can measure how effective it is instantaneously and adjust it as needed. So it's an extremely effective system.
So, boys and girls, when you're using Facebook and Instagram and all that other stuff, that's free. You're the product.
Yep.
That's why it's free. Nothing's free. So
My wife stopped using it when I started working on this project because she realized how little was really private. Because, like I say, they take your profile, they take my profile, and all they do is they change the name. So they're using your sentiments, they're using what you say and what you think, and then they're putting it out there with a different name on it with your profile, with the fake information that they want out there.
yeah. Yeah, and with chat bots added on, they can literally have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
It's an automated conversation. You're just talking to a bot. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
computerized a piece of program, an instance of a program that's
Yeah.
driving your role of perception.
I actually liken it less as bots, computerized bots, as computerized troll farms.
Yeah, viruses, mental
Yeah.
viruses.
Yeah.
So they use okay, so now, okay, we've got the military part, or trying to undermine different countries. But you know how in the US they're now driving transgenderism, child-free, and all this other insane, suicidal, liberal crap. How much of that is the government creating the same? Because it looks like the same thing in its own ways. Is that really people behind it, or is it bots again? It's just the same types of systems.
It's the same system, exactly the same system. Like I say, it was funded by all the major intelligence agencies, the Pentagon, you know, so it's everything. It's a way to control the people. And, you know, it's using much of the same techniques that have always been used. You have 100 people, protesting for this uh, alternative lifestyle, as they call it. And, with the camera shots, the video shots, they make it look like hundreds of thousands of people out there when it really isn't. And these computer systems can adjust things, modify things, put text behind them, and say, this is what's going on. And unfortunately, it seems like a lot of Westerners, at least, are losing their critical thinking skills. So they look at it and they don't think, something's wrong here. We're hearing more and more of it now, but
You know, I'll call you Snowden number 2.0, because Snowden 1.0 came in and said that, how much people are being monitored. And what was shocking was how many people in America, after being told you're being monitored and controlled by the government, your freedoms are an illusion, blah, 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 they called him a traitor.
yeah. And, you know, he was telling the truth.
He was.
And this is what the government does to people who tell the truth.
Yes.
Another example, Scott Ritter talks the truth and they pretty much ruined his life.
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
Scott's a fighter. They went after him different ways, but a lot of what happened to him was all setups as well from the government.
Hmm. You know, we listened to Ritter, we listened to McGregor and Black and a lot of these colonels and a lot of other people. But you got to wonder how many of them are going to be either dead or refugees, political refugees, say in Crimea,
Yeah.
within the next 2 years. Because everyone's, oh, Trump's going to come election. First of all, the elections that were stolen in 2020, what's changed? Everything's still the same. Nothing's been amended. No systems have been changed. Write-in mail-in ballots. I don't see, the Democrats just walking away from ultimate power.
Yeah. Well, one of the ways you can tell that Trump will be no different is this current election cycle. He started out with, I will end the war between Ukraine and Russia in 24 hours. Then Israel and Gaza came along and he was going to end that too. Now, all of a sudden, he's very pro-Israel and we need to go in there and, you know, fight and support them and get rid of these evil Palestinians. And, you know, again, it's a lot of propaganda wrapped around it. People start thinking in terms of Russians are bad, as in Russian people. Palestinian people are bad. They're all terrorists. And that isn't the case. Hamas, you know, they have their reasons for doing what they do. Israel has their reasons, but they're governments. You know, Russia in Ukraine and NATO fighting in Ukraine is the governments. It's not the people. This was a disagreement I had with Scott Ritter on his own show once. Was he said there are no good Ukrainians because anybody who is good, you know, would go out and, you know, fight against their government. And it's like, Scott, if something like this happened in the United States, would you put your wife and daughter out on the front line? Well, no. I said, so there's no good Americans either. Well. So, you know, these are the things is everybody gets their perceptions a little skewed on things.
Right, right. Um, yeah, absolutely. And that's why I enjoyed all, you know, I lived in the US for a long time, obviously. I always enjoyed hearing people like, oh, if they ever come for our guns and all this, we'll stand and fight. No, you won't. The vast majority will surrender your guns. Because
Yep.
when that 4 meter tall uh, uh, 4 meter tall SWAT truck, the Mac Pro comes rolling down that can actually go right through your wooden box house, you'll surrender your guns. The vast majority will surrender their guns. The vast
Yep.
majority will do what they're said, what they're told once the
If
government arrives in force.
if at that point they actually have any guns left. Because
Right.
again, you get the NRA in there trying to be very pro-gun, but you have all these lobbies who, you know, all of these shootings are not just kids going nuts and going in and shooting places. A lot of it is built up, planned through the government. Not all of them. I will not ever claim that. You know, some stuff does happen that isn't good, but a lot of these things are meant specifically to be able to tighten the gun control laws and drive people's perceptions to guns are bad, we should turn them in.
So wait a second. So let's clarify what you just said. At least some of the mass shootings in the US, which are happening weekly these days, at least some of those
Yes,
mass shootings are organized and driven by some parts of the US government,
yes,
knowing that they're going to be mass shootings, dead women, dead children, their own citizens. For political ends, they're driving mass murder.
yes. Some of them.
Some of them, right? Some of them. There's another issue with a lot of it too is, and even Michael Moore, who's as liberal as it gets, had to admit that a lot of those shootings were also linked to antidepressants and the fact that
Yeah,
the scripts are just given out left and right like candy to teenagers, and nobody's monitoring them
sure.
afterwards. But that's also creating the same grounds for it.
Yeah. And the fact that this is part of that liberal thought process again is people with mental health issues, well, give them a pill, let them out loose on the street, and they're fine, knowing that they aren't.
And by the way, if you look at any of the manifestos of the vast majority of those shooters, they're not Christian, God-fearing, I'll go to church people. They're the
Right,
purple-haired psycho, my life is ruined, I'm going to ruin your life, and so on and so on. We don't exist. We're just meat, puppets, and yeah, I can kill whomever I want to. The manifestos are
right.
extremely liberal.
So on things like mass shootings, let's bring it home. Moscow in March, you know, this warning from the US Embassy, it was put out unofficially. It did not go through official channels that they had any information. And it was on the week that originally when Shaman was supposed to perform. But security was too high, too many high-profile people there. So these guys put it off for a few weeks. There was no new warning issued. The US government did not go through official channels to notify Russia. And immediately after it happened, before even the guys were caught and any investigations were done, the United States is announcing it wasn't Ukraine.
I'll
And
tell you.
then,
Yeah.
then with them going towards Ukraine, then it was ISIS-K. Well, ISIS-K was a CIA-funded group used for their purposes. And, all the information that I have from my sources is they were reactivated for this again. So even though it appears it came from, our friends next door, and, there's a very, very high likelihood that it had US government funding behind it.
I believe absolutely. ISIS to
Yeah.
begin with, it's a legal organization, I don't know if it's a full creation of the US and its allies, but it is a tool of the US and its allies. It appeared in
Yeah.
Libya when it was needed, appeared in Afghanistan when it was needed, never launched a single attack on American forces for the most, well, very rare attacks on American forces.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of Iraqi eyewitnesses that said American planes were dropping equipment and supplies to ISIS over and over. Never launched a single attack against Israel. In fact, there's videos of Israel allowing wounded ISIS troops across their border for medical care.
Mm-hmm.
Damn, those cameras. They're everywhere.
And what do we have going on in Turkey? A NATO ally, yet they're supporting the Kurds.
Yeah.
So same difference.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Which is, and the Kurds there are hitting both Syria and Turkey while we're at it. And the Kurds are
Right.
really an odd group because in northern Iraq, at least half the Kurds are on Turkey's side. Half the
Yeah.
Kurds are, I don't know whose side, because they're definitely not on the Arab side. And Mosul, which is now a Kurdish town after the U.S. massacred the population there by freeing it from IGIL by leveling it and driving through putting a flag. So yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess.
Yeah. And who's really been providing most of the security for Israel by keeping a lot of these organizations kind of under control, should we say? But Russia. This
Yeah.
is the forces that have been on the border between Lebanon and Israel. And, but what we started seeing in the news over the last month or so is that Russia is sending forces to the border with Israel. They sent back in a police unit that they had pulled out a couple of months before simply because there was more activity going on. But it's that propaganda factor again. It's real easy to then take it and throw it out there to people. And with them closing off Russian media or any media that's friendly to Russia to their people, it then draws that perception. The Department of Defense dictionary defines perception management. That's what they call propaganda.
Perception management. Well, it is. I mean, it is perception management. Propaganda is very much
Yeah.
perception. It's more than that. So you would say that what percent of the American population is under basic government control, whether they know it or not?
It's got to be 90%.
Ooh. Wow. Wow.
Maybe 85. The ones who aren't are the ones who are trying to immigrate here. So, if they want to come to Crimea, we help them immigrate here, my wife and I. She teaches Russian to English speakers and English to Russian speakers. We help them with the immigration process, the the whole deal, getting their money over here.
Yeah, it's a big one. That's an issue that we need to talk about. We're running out of time. I want to thank Kevin for joining.